So today I am at the very beginning of creating an artwork for a good colleague and friend, an amazing teacher who just got married this summer. The most beautiful bride, I have to say, I've seen in a very long time, and a gorgeous human being. So I'm excited to paint her bouquet. This is the first time I've painted a bouquet of a bride, and she gave me some lovely pictures to work from. So these are going to be some of my resource images that came from not only just pictures that she took, but also from her photographer. And just to begin, today is about color choices and thinking about how I'm going to begin this actual artwork. So great resource images, plus I have a few more, but those were some really good ones. I always like to start with color, and I keep these color swatches of just some of the colors that I have on hand so that I can have a good choice of what's going to really give me the effect that I want. She herself is a very low-key person, which is evident in her bouquet as well. It has some beautiful soft colors. So in looking at some of the colors that I'm going to choose for her, I'm going to keep them soft and very pretty. I'm going to use just a touch of gold, I think, in this one, in some of the under layers, and then painting over some of that gold will just soften it down. Not too much blue, but I have chosen just a little bit of Prussian blue and some Payne's gray, and that'll give me some of the darks that I need. I'm going to use some Titan Mars, some Titan Green Pale, and some light bismuth yellow, which will give me some of those really soft colors that I need. As far as greens, I'm going to go with a Jenkins green, and I'm going to go with a green gold. That should give me some nice variety. And of course, a little bit of some pinks and purples will show up in there. Orange is not going to be part of this. I might make an orange a little bit out of some of the color choices that I have, but I may include a little bit of the Quin Magenta, Titan Buff, Unbleached Titanium Parchment. So a nice small color scheme. I already went ahead and chose some of the papers that I'm going to be using for collage. So definitely some white on whites and some transparents, some beautiful creams that I might use from some old book pages, some of the soft pinks, and I'll have to make a few more pinks for sure because she's got a really beautiful pink in her bouquet. Some greens, a little bit of blue for some shadows and shading, a little bit more pink, some golds, and soft colors. So I chose some of my collage materials already because I want to use them as I just play and practice a little bit today in my sketchbook, which is what I'm going to do next. So I'm going to be using just, oops, a little hair. I'm going to be using a grid format in my sketchbook just to play with some of these color choices and see what color combinations I can come up with so that when I move to the original work, I have a good plan in place for how I'm going to use colors, but also some textures and collage as well. So that'll be the next piece. So I'm ready to begin my grid journaling, and I have to give a huge shout out to Kelly Wynn Studios. She's an amazing artist, teacher, entrepreneur, and she's the one who I first saw really doing this type of journaling and working out ideas. She has some great classes that you can take. She's got a freebie right now about grid journaling, and she's got some great workshops that you can take with her. So Kelly Wynn of Kelly Wynn Studios, and I will put some information in this video at the end, just so that you can check her out, because this is all her. It's because of her that I started doing this, and I just want to pass on this great information. So this is how I've now been experimenting and playing, all because of her. So what I'm going to do to start, and then I will kind of speed things up a little bit. I have all of my paints out. This is a lot more than I'll probably actually use in the end, but it's going to give me a chance to experiment and see what is going to really work and what I need and what I don't need. And I've got all of my collage papers. I've got some matte medium ready to go, some brushes. I'm going to begin with some collage, give it a dry, probably come in with some drawing, and then get into some painting. So it's a little bit of a drawn out process, but it's really going to help me in the long run get to where I need to be ready to start my original piece. So have fun. So at this point, I've put some paints down just to kind of play with some of the colors, see what I can make with it. I am discovering these are too close together. Not so sure I'm gonna like this yellow as much as I'm gonna like the yellow gold with the yellow ochre. So this may not be so much a part of it. I will definitely keep these and the parchment kind of color, that Titan buff. The next thing I'm going to do is I put out some magenta, which was not on my palette before, and I also have some glazing medium. What I really like about glazing medium is that it doesn't really break down the pigment, so you still keep that strong pigment, but you get a really, really watered down glaze without water. So it's just a really nice, so this is some of the medium. I'm going to take the smallest amount of magenta into here, just because I'm curious. That's still a lot of magenta. What will this look like if I glazed over with some magenta? So I'm just going to pick one of these. When you glaze over an entire piece like this, it pulls all the colors together because it has something in common over all of it. So putting some magenta in here, maybe I'll try a little more magenta. It allows the other colors to glow through without really destroying the color. So I'm using some of this magenta, which is definitely in her bouquet. And I might just try it in some places just to soften some parts, but maybe not over the whole thing. So that's a possibility too. So right now I'm just kind of playing to see what that will look like for me and if that's something I want to use or not. I'm already thinking it's going to be a yes. So that's pretty cool. This magenta just kind of brightens it up a bit. Oop, maybe that's a little more than I want. And just kind of pull some of those colors together. I'm also going to try a little bit of maybe some of this with this Titan Mars, which is a little bit more of a peach. This is a more opaque color than the magenta. The magenta is quite transparent. So this is going to do, this will allow this to become more transparent, but it will definitely have a different effect. So let's see how this looks over. So you can see already, you can see that really does a lot more coverage, which might be nice in some areas too. So let's see what it looks like with a little bit of the peach, of the Titan Mars, but also some of this really transparent magenta. Just kind of softens a few things down. Takes away, oh, it's kind of nice. So I think I like that bit. Let's see what happens with a little bit of some of the green gold. So we'll put out a little bit more of the medium. And maybe some of that yellow ochre. Now green gold again is very, very transparent. So it's already a transparent color. So it's just going to give a really, really soft green, which I like too. Very pretty. And we'll try a little bit of, let's try the yellow ochre. See what that looks like. Oh, that'll give it a nice soft cream. That's going to be nice over some of the roses, I think. That really soft, creamy color. So that'll work nicely. And I'm going to try a little Payne's Gray too. Let's try a little bit of that. A little medium. Add a little more water in there than I like. Yeah. And I'm going to try a little magenta with that Payne's Gray to bring out a little bit of purple. That might be a nice soft touch too. I liked these purple dots in here, so that might work out really well too. Yeah. So definitely some of that glazing medium over the top just to soften areas and to unify them a little bit more, I think is going to be a really nice touch. I really am not liking that blue. It's just a little too bold in here, so I'm gonna calm that down. Just a little much. You definitely need smaller amounts of the blue, but it's going to be important for some of the darker areas. So that'll be a must. It just needs to be a little bit smaller. Okay, good experiments. Well, I am ready to begin. I have a cradle board, 12 by 12 inch. I like to work square, and I think that works really nicely for the bouquet. I've taped off the edges with some painter's tape because I can get quite messy, and I want to make sure that once the image is complete and I tear off the tape, I'm going to have a nice smooth edge, maybe just a tiny bit of sanding, and then I can paint the edge and create a nice finished piece. Some people like to paint down around the edges, but this isn't really thick enough, and I find these look best in a floating frame anyway, which will cover up the edges. However, it can be hung just as it is. I'm going to be using some molding paste to start. I didn't do this in my sketchbook, but this is just going to give it a little bit of a textured surface. I decided that once this is dry, I'm going to use some nice washes to almost create a watercolor effect underneath before I go in with the collage. So just a choice that I've made since I started. I'm going to use this catalyst brush. These are really fun tools. And this molding paste is very thick. And I'm using a lace, just because this is wetting. I'm going to use a lace stencil and just push this through. So this will just create some raised areas for the acrylic paint to flow into and create some interesting patterns. Just add a little more depth to the piece. I very much love layers. So the more layers that I can get in my piece, I feel like it just adds so much depth to the work and interest when you get up close and look in. This is so thick, I think I'm going to switch over to, I think I'm going to switch over to a palette knife. This is just a plastic palette knife, but I think that this is just going to help make that spread just a little easier because it's hard instead of soft. And then I can really get this in there. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Just depends, right? Depends on what you're trying to do. Push it through. But I do like those catalyst brushes a lot. I think that's what they're called. But they're rubber. They clean up really well. I use it a lot for when I'm scraping paint over a surface. It's also really great for, like, if you're doing some gel medium, it just comes right off. So I just really want to kind of get this around a couple edges, not everywhere. I want there we go. A few different things to happen. So I'll switch down to this corner. I might not do quite as much, but I think you can see that lace design in there, which is perfect for wedding. So just a little bit more of this, and then I'll let it dry, and I'll come back in with some washes. So that's going to be some really thin layers of acrylic that I'm going to treat almost as if it was watercolor, just to get rid of the white surface, which I don't like working on white. I really like to have, I think that's going to be good. I don't want too much on here. Yeah. And a little bit down in this corner, and then that'll be plenty, just to give it a little something extra. And then most of the bouquet is going to be in that middle area, coming off to the edges. Always want to think about going off your edges, create those illusions that there's more to the image than what we can see. And that's just a compositional element that really adds to the piece. So never forget your edges. And bringing an image off 3 edges is a nice compositional choice. So I'm already thinking about that as I work. And let's see. Oh, I got a little thick here, so I'm going to scrape that off. Very resilient. There we go. And I'm just going to leave it like that to dry, and then I'll go in with some paint. I am ready now for my next step. The molding paste is dry, so what I'm going to do is start doing some glazing, but with water this time. And I just want the paint to flow. So I'm using a little spray bottle, getting my surface wet. Then I'm going to use a very wet brush, pretty, medium-sized brush. Actually, I'm going to switch to something a little bit softer. And I'm going to think about the different areas and kind of where I want the colors to pool. Why don't we start up here where the molding paste is, and we'll see how that goes. I'm going to use some darker colors, some lighter colors through the middle, some of those magentas, pinks, peaches, creams, and a little bit of some darkness in these areas as well. So I'm going to speed up the video just a bit so that you can see this in I am now back to my sketchbook. I just wanted to kind of look this over a little bit before I moved on to my collage, which I have set up next to me. And with my sketchbook, I think it's pretty obvious that my colors are working. I've got some great textures that I may smooth out or level out a little bit later, but because I use all of that watery paint, it's moved into some of the cracks and crevices. It's given me just a little bit of form to the artwork to start working with. And as I move into collage, I'll start to build up some more darks, some lights. I might soften a few things that I've started with some of the more transparent papers. This is a white transparent paper. So I've done some stenciling in white on this tissue. It's actually a wet strength tissue paper, so it's a little bit stronger, kind of like deli paper. And when it goes over other things, especially when it gets wet, the white will stay white, but all of the colors and things that are underneath it will show through. And I have some of that also with some other patterns. I've chosen same color schemes, but a little bit larger pattern than I used in my sketchbook. These were quite small as far as patterns go, but I'm scaling up, so I'm also scaling up some of the patterns that I'm using. I still have similar colors. Here's some of that gold fleck that I think I'm going to use a little bit in here. Those pops of magenta pieces, and some of these softer, more neutral pieces that will eventually come out in the roses. So I'm gonna move on to now using my matte medium. The reason I use matte medium is because if I do any drawing on top of this with either pencil, or if I'm going to use some other mark making materials, it's nice to have the matte because otherwise the gloss medium is too slick. So this is what I use for my glue. All right, here we go. Here we are back, and collage first layer is done. All I've done at this point is just kind of bring in some of that color from the collage, the Gerber daisies that kind of move off into this direction, a few roses that are tucked in between a larger rose here and some roses down here. It kind of makes a pathway, but then crosses over this way as well. I'm going to gray out and have some of the flowers disappear here. Bring in some of that lacy kind of feel in here. And some of the purples and greens will come down into here eventually. But I'll probably do some of that with collage because she's got these beautiful sprigs that go through her bouquet. So at this point, I'm now going to shift back to paint and work on another layer that will just start to define some of the forms and the layout of my composition, and just start to work in some of the darks and the lights, and then go back in with some midtones in a bit. So some of the petals, some of the flowers, a little bit more detail without getting too crazy at this moment. So just starting to work it.